listening to Minute Mayor Exclusive. This is Zain Khan. Today, the topic of our show is, are we heading towards a World War III scenario? The guest of our show is a geopolitical analyst and also a researcher, a fellow at American University of Moscow. He is joining us from Canada. Welcome to our show, Matthew Ehret. It is such a pleasure having you again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Matthew, I want to get to the first question. It's been approximately 2 years since we've seen the Ukrainian-Russia conflict happening. Do you see it ending anytime soon, or are we going to observe it expanding in the near future?
Unfortunately, right now, I don't see any evidence of adults in the room in the West that are capable of initiating some form of a peaceful resolution. The way the offers from Russia and including also Chinese diplomacy have made incredibly simple, effective strategies and offers for the West to disengage and to create a peaceful resolution. We've seen this with the Minsk I, Minsk II protocols. We've seen this with the Chinese offers to create a security zone that respects the security interests of Russia, and simply involves respecting the right of Ukraine to live as a sovereign nation without any commitments to joining NATO or anything of the sort. But it requires dialogue. It requires some honesty, some self-reflection, and I don't see any of that. And in fact, unfortunately, there is a doubling down with the recent bill that is going to be pouring another $60 billion into defense of Ukraine from the United States side. That's just been passed in the House of Representatives. So there's more fuel. They're going to be expecting action for that money from Zelensky and the crowd managing Zelensky, who are unfortunately tied to a bunch of unnegotiable radical neo-Nazis, and figures who really are obsessed with the idea of restoring some sort of a Black Rock controlled fascist state inside of Ukraine that would be a part of NATO. So we will expect to see another expansion of an assault against the eastern side, the Donetsk and other Russian forces in Ukraine. They've lost over 600 million people. 600,000 people so far, which is no joke. That's sick, and there's only going to be more death if this continues. And now we hear discussion as well from the European side of sending in European troops to train more expansively. This has been done covertly, but now they're openly speaking about this being done somehow as if this wasn't a NATO operation. So that's a huge danger. And no, currently there is no evidence of this thing slowing down.
I understand your point of view. Do you see any other countries getting sucked into this conflict?
Well, as I alluded to, unfortunately, we've heard already Macron coming out threatening to bring in French troops, and a more broader discussion is happening across many European countries. Finland, their leadership is also proposing to send in Finnish troops, and other European countries are calling in for other European troops to begin participating in the direct war itself. They're saying through training, logistic support, and other things, which are kind of already happening, but more unofficially, that's already occurring. So that could easily escalate more quickly than people realize. And for those who may not think about how quick that could happen, I suggest reviewing the speed at which World War I derailed from a small dispute between two countries, Serbia and Austria, into an all-out conflagration due to secret mutual security pacts like the Entente Cordiale, negotiated by Great Britain and British, very subversive, sophisticated diplomacy that Germany did not even know about, which enmeshed both France but also Russia into an activation of said treaty should a conflict break out with one of Russia's, which is exactly what was initiated. So with the entire Article 5 of the Collective Security Pact of NATO, that NATO countries are much bigger than people realize. So yes, the danger of massive conflagration is very big.
I always enjoy your analysis. I want to get to a technical question. Can you provide steps that may lead to de-escalation, which our viewers can obviously learn from?
Yeah, you need to have first of all, you need to end the law that Zelensky has passed, which makes it illegal to have any type of discussion with Putin or representatives of Russia. That's been made into the national policy of Ukraine, is the non-negotiation with Russians. So without any dialogue, peace is impossible, and that is the design. We know that there were major steps early on in the conflict in April, just 2 months, a month and a half after the conflict originally began and the special military operation was launched, I think in March and April, there was already a peace process that was begun with members of the Ukrainian side negotiating in Turkey with the Russians. And unfortunately, the lead negotiator on the Ukrainian side died a very mysterious and quick death upon his return to Kiev. And no similar discussion has been permitted since then. So I would say, for number one, that has to happen. Number two, stop pouring fuel on the fire. The fire will go out if you choke it off of the oxygen that the fire needs. That is the infinite amounts of money printing that is going on to use Ukrainians as cannon fodder in a proxy war against Russia. So stop doing that, and you'll find that the means of carrying out war will be dissipated. So these are the sorts of steps that need to really begin to take place quickly. And we have to have a long-term view of things, because the reconstruction of Ukraine, the healing of the damage that we've done to several generations, is not something that can heal quickly. It'll take time.
Now, we've seen that the Palestinian and Israel conflict is widening. It's becoming extremely violent. Why can't the international law try to end the conflict? Why has it not been able to do that?
It's in some ways similar to your questioning on the Ukraine issue. The conflict is objectively very easy to remedy. The solutions are not difficult in a mechanical sense. It involves simply a multitude of things that are easy for any adult who's not suffering from infantile ego issues or God complex to deal with, which involves having an honest adult dialogue with the assumption that all sides want to have a life of peace for their kids and grandkids. That's the one attitude shift that needs to simply happen. And I'm not saying it's possible with the current configuration of leadership. I'm simply saying that that's what's needed and what should be expected. And additionally, the cutting off of oxygen from the fire, involving the seemingly infinite support financially and militarily for the conflict to just continue and continue, with more billions of dollars to support the Israeli war program and war regime, which has gone for a completely disproportionate assault, resulting in well over 35, even I think I've seen 40,000 deaths, mostly non-combatants, 16,000 of which are children, in the most disproportionate form of retaliation for something which itself on October 7th had very dubious origins. And this has been again proven. People like Chaz Freeman, the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, as well as Ron Paul and many others, have documented how the US and Israeli defense forces and Israeli intelligence have been behind the creation and cultivation and growth of Hamas per se, to begin with, going back to the First Intifada as an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood, which itself has certain connections with Western intelligence going back quite some time. So there's all of these other elements to this thing, indicating also Benjamin Netanyahu has given speeches that have been recorded. People could read the transcript, saying that if to his fellow Zionist leaders within the Israeli government, that if you want to have the best type of Palestinian representative government, we should continue to support Hamas. And he has said this on several occasions since 2009. Why? Because the existence of a more religiously oriented grouping that was under the influence of Western intelligence would be less inclined to have the sorts of adult negotiations that we saw with Yasser Arafat, who was able to act like an adult in the 90s and even long before that, to negotiate with other adults like Yitzhak Rabin and other labor Zionists who didn't want to have Greater Israel. They didn't want to have an Israeli-managed super state dominating a subhuman race of Arabs, but rather wanted economic development and mutual coexistence, which is why the Oslo Accords would have worked had they not been sabotaged when they were launched in the early 90s. And unfortunately, had it not been for the murder of Yitzhak Rabin by a minister of Israel in 95, and then later on the poisoning of Arafat, who had called out as well Hamas as being a foreign agency, disrupting the PLO's attempts to try to create economic cooperation, then you would have had a very different world that could have seen the sort of water management projects that were being discussed in the 90s, desalination. That's roads, hospitals, infrastructure that would have created jobs and healed the pain of decades of revanchist eye for an eye issues that have plagued the people of the Middle East for a long time. And a lot of this, again, has foreign manipulation all over it, going back a century or more ago. And so these are all real factors. And now, like I said, the solutions to getting an off ramp and to getting a progressive dialogue towards peace, especially with the assistance of places like China that are very good at building infrastructure, that have provided peace programs for reconstruction throughout the Middle East as well as Africa, building up like actually using national banking to provide for the needs of 10, 20, 30-year programs for the reconstruction of nations that have been destroyed by NATO and the US military industrial complex. Those are all things that are available to all of us. They could be done in a second, but it requires a serious dosing of humble pie eating in the West and a lot of changing of our paradigm to start making that type of dialogue possible.
After the Iran and Israel standoff, they literally attacked each other. Where do you see this conflict going?
Hopefully not Armageddon. I mean, so far there's obviously been completely insane efforts, it seems, by the current Israeli government to pick a fight with everybody, almost as if they believe perhaps in some sort of a weird prophetic eschatology that sees them as being responsible for bringing in the Messiah, which I'm coming to increasingly be persuaded might be an animating factor in the minds of some of these fanatics. The killing of red heifers that will somehow usher in some prophecy done 6,000 years ago, for the Messiah to come for the first time. And so some of these groupings are not animated by their genuine self-interest or even money making. These are not animating factors for some and many of those currently making very big military decisions, which results in strange things like trying to provoke, not only while you're doing this thing and carrying out atrocities in the Gaza, but you're also at the same time trying to pick a fight with Lebanon, launching strikes into Lebanon, into Syria, beyond, and now Iran, where Iranian diplomats and generals were killed in the Iranian embassy that was located in Syria, which obviously was desirous of a provocation, like Israel has wanted. We know that, specifically Benjamin Netanyahu and his clique with their Christian Zionist colleagues in the across the ocean have been on a rampage for decades, wanting to blow up Iran and conduct regime change there. We've seen by Richard Pearl and the other neocons in the late 90s when Yitzhak Rabin was killed. And this was drafted in 1996 as a program for securing the realm, that is, purging and subduing the Arabs living in and around Israel as a Greater Israel project. And within that document, there was the program for regime change in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and fundamentally Iran was the trophy to be regime changed. And we've seen many attempts to do that for a long time. So they're hungry for that idea. Iran has withheld incredibly. They've not fallen so far for the many traps that have been set, and Iran has had a lot of provocations of their scientists, their generals being assassinated over the years. to try to induce some form of retaliation to make them seem like the bad guys in a new narrative. Carried out a limited retaliation that they gave 72 hours notice for, and only struck military targets in Israel, demonstrating that the Iron Dome is not the invincible thing that has been portrayed in propaganda. They've chosen to take, I think, a relatively and Israel obviously did respond in a limited way as well, possibly because Russia may have intervened, according to Pepe Escobar sources, but I don't know that. I have not confirmed that. But Iran's response I found to be quite mature thus far, in the sense that even the foreign minister has said that, well, we don't really know who attacked us when Israel launched a counterstrike more recently, and that's a wise fake ignorance to project publicly, because they're doing everything to avoid falling into a World War I trap, of taking that leap into something that can easily escalate into a thermonuclear war. And we know that Israel does have a Samson option in its tool basket that it is ready to deploy. Golda Meir and many others have spoken about the Samson option, which essentially says that if Israel feels itself existentially threatened, it will launch whatever nuclear weapons and however many hundreds that it has on everyone around it, including its allies. So that's a suicide option. If people know the Old Testament, that is a crazy factor. It's a crazy factor, but one that's so much more dangerous than your typical crazy factors, because it involves those nuclear weapons. So again, Iran having a strategic alliance with Russia and with China, and being a major part of the fundamental stability, the Eurasian security architecture, I think is being currently much more mature, much more wise, knowing that it cannot fall for these traps and has not done so thus far. So kudos to Iran thus far, and I hope that the more radical elements within Iran continue to keep their mouths shut and don't act according to the provocations.
Are there other geopolitical hotspots escalating? I mean, do you foresee any regions getting hotter as things pass by? Because we have the Middle East, we have Israel, Palestine, we have Ukraine and Russia, and now Iran and Israel. Do you see other things happening soon?
The one that's the most concerning to me right now is obviously the escalation in the Pacific. Right now, there's U.S. Philippine war games that are going to be carried out until May 10th. The HIMARS system, long-range mobile defense missile systems, are also a part of the Philippine-U.S. military exercises. This is a dark day for the Philippines, which is being brought into essentially under Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who I had a lot of hope for, that he would maybe represent some more nationalist reflexes embodied by some of his father's better efforts to try to keep the Philippines outside of the control of the CIA and the U.S. military-industrial complex. I'm unfortunately being very disappointed in what I'm seeing. So there's a NATO of the Pacific, which is on the agenda. Japan, not only does it have 58,000 U.S. troops, but there's a plan to expand that, and as well get Japan into the AUKUS. It's a nuclear submarine program that involves the UK, USA, and Australia, but also Canada is now moving to join it. New Zealand is moving to join it. Another Pacific country, as well as Japan, has made their intention known for a fast track, and that is a part of the broader NATO of the Pacific agenda. So far, India has been smart enough to stay away from it and to push back. So that's smart, that it seems at the moment, at the very least, India is not engaging so much with that as some in the West had hoped that they would, knowing that India is still part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with Pakistan and many other Eurasian countries. But you have the same military shield, this missile shield known as full spectrum dominance that I alluded to earlier around Russia's perimeter, that is also expanding around Russia's Pacific perimeter, but also around China. And finally, the efforts to provoke not only more separatist empowerment in Taiwan, which is an official part legally of China as one nation, but that autonomous province of China is being used. Green Berets have been deployed now on the ground in Taiwan to train Taiwanese troops. U.S. arms deals are bypassing mainland China and going straight between Washington and Taiwan to empower a war policy and use Taiwan, as Ukraine has been used, as a proxy in an upcoming war with China. And we just have to listen to the words of many, many U.S. representative war hawks who are getting bankrolled by the U.S. military-industrial complex to hear them describe almost like in a freakish way how they believe that a war with China is good, is necessary, and inevitable, despite China having no desire whatsoever and only presenting common sense, reasonable offers for the West to find win-win cooperation on economic development that would be in everybody's interests. So that's another hotspot that is heavy on my mind.
I want to get to the last question, and I want this brief, but I want your analysis. Can we say that we're living in a World War III scenario? Are we close to it? Are we living in it? What's your take on that?
If you want me to be brief, what I can absolutely say is yes, we are in it. The World War III scenario is upon us. The process is already in place. It's like a tsunami. It takes a while after the tsunami actually hits for the shock front to hit, or after the earthquake hits, it takes a while for the tsunami to actually hit the shores. At this point, it's a matter of figuring out how we different geometry of potential. Once the shockwave hits, then the opportunity to have conversations like we're having, to think, to read, to go to the grocery store, to buy your food, to expect to be able to have a house over your head and to pay your bills, all of these things, forget about it. Like, you're in different geometry of basic survival, of chaos. And people go crazy fast when those sorts of moments strike humanity. Crazy becomes the norm, and any type of rational discourse is gone. So we have to exist in a limited way to turn the tide of this cataclysmic, titanic failure of humanity. But yeah, World War III the process has begun.
Thank you so much, Matthew Ehret, for being on Minute Mayor Exclusive. It's a pleasure having you.
Always a pleasure, Zain.
This was Matthew Ehret, a researcher, a geopolitical analyst, and also the fellow at American University in Moscow. We were discussing the World War III scenario with Matthew Ehret. Until the next episode, Minute Mayor Exclusive. This is Zain Khan. Take care. Goodbye.